I was trick-or-treating with my best friend, Kelly, when we were 11 years old. It was one of those perfect Halloween nights, clear skies, a full moon, and just the right amount of chill in the air. We were having the time of our lives, our bags getting heavier with every house we visited. As we made our way across a small wooden bridge over a creek known as Winkle River, a black Jeep suddenly pulled up on the other side, blocking our path. We froze, unsure of what to do. The windows rolled down, and a man with a raspy, smoker's voice called out to us, asking for directions. "We're lost," he said, his voice gravelly and strained. "Can you help us out?" Something about the way he spoke sent a shiver down my spine. Kelly and I exchanged a glance, and without a word, we turned and started walking away as quickly as we could. The Jeep couldn't cross the narrow bridge, so we thought we were safe. But as we reached the end of the bridge, we heard the engine roar to life, and the Jeep sped off down the road. We were just starting to feel relieved when we saw headlights coming around the corner. An SUV barreled toward us, screeching to a halt just a few feet away. The windows rolled down, and inside were three men, one in the driver's seat, one in the passenger seat, and an older man with gray hair in the back. The older man leaned out the window, his raspy voice matching the one we had heard earlier. "Hey, we've got free candy in here," he said, grinning at us. "Come on, get in the car." We didn't need to be told twice. We turned and ran as fast as we could, the Jeep revving its engine as it started after us. My house was just a few blocks away, and I could see it in the distance, but the fear that we wouldn't make it in time was overwhelming. As we rounded the corner onto my street, the Jeep suddenly sped past us, coming to a screeching halt in front of my house. The doors flew open, and the two men from the SUV stepped out, lunging toward us. We dropped our bags of candy and bolted for the front door, frantically ringing the doorbell over and over. My mom opened the door just as the men were closing in. She pulled us inside and slammed the door, locking it behind her. The men backed off, getting into the Jeep and speeding away as my mom called the police. I was shaking, my heart pounding in my chest, as I tried to explain what had happened. The police arrived quickly and took down our descriptions of the men and the vehicle. They promised to keep an eye out, and my mom stayed up all night, worried that the men might come back. But the most terrifying moment came a few hours later when the police knocked on our door to tell us they had caught the men. The Jeep had been pulled over not far from our house, and inside were the three men, now in handcuffs. My dad went outside to speak with the officers, and when he came back, he told us that the men had been planning to kidnap us. The thought of what could have happened if we hadn't made it to the house in time still haunts me. It was the scariest night of my life, but I'm just glad we got away. This happened on Halloween night a few years ago. I took my 7-year-old daughter, Emma, trick-or-treating for a few hours before we came home. We had a great time. She was dressed as a little witch, and she had collected a ton of candy. After we got back, I made dinner, and we watched some TV together before I sent her to bed. Not long after she went to her room, Emma came back looking scared. "There's someone in my closet," she said, her voice trembling. I assured her that there was no one there and that she was safe, but she insisted, asking if she could sleep with me. I didn't want to encourage her fear, so I told her to go back to her room and that I would check on her in a little while. A few minutes later, she was back, this time even more frightened. "I heard something moving in there," she said, her eyes wide with fear. I heard things falling over. Now I was starting to get a little concerned. I grabbed a flashlight and walked with her to her room. I turned on the light, trying to keep things lighthearted. "See?" I said, opening the closet door. "There's no one in here." But as we stood there in the silence, we both heard it. A thud from inside the closet. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a surge of fear. I told Emma to run to the neighbor's house and call the police, and she took off down the hallway. I yanked the closet door open, expecting to find nothing. But there, sitting on top of Emma's toy chest, was the neighbor's teenage son, Ryan. I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and dragged him out of the closet, furious. "What the hell are you doing in here?" I demanded, but he just stared at the floor, too scared to answer. I marched him next door to his house, where Emma was already ringing the doorbell. When Ryan's dad opened the door, I shoved him inside. explaining what had happened. Ryan's dad was livid. He slapped Ryan across the face, then turned to me, apologizing profusely. He asked me to come inside so Ryan could explain himself, and reluctantly, I agreed. As it turned out, Ryan and his friend Kyle had snuck into our house while I was out with Emma, planning to play a prank. They had crawled in through an open window and hidden in Emma's closet, not realizing how far they were taking things. When I asked if Kyle was still in the house, Ryan nodded and I told Emma to stay with Ryan's dad while I went back to check. Sure enough, there was Kyle, crouched in the corner of Emma's closet, holding one of her stuffed animals. The sight of him sent a wave of anger through me, and before I knew it, I had him by the throat, shoving him to the floor. I slapped him a few times, then told him to get the hell out of my house. I didn't call the police, partly because I was friends with Ryan's dad and partly because I didn't want to drag Emma through the ordeal. But I made it clear that if they ever came near my daughter again, I wouldn't hesitate to make them regret it. After that night, Emma was too scared to sleep in her own room, so she stayed with me for a while. The next morning, I found a small hole drilled into the closet door. Ryan and Kyle had been spying on Emma, watching her as she changed clothes and played in her room. The thought of what they were planning to do still makes my blood boil. In hindsight, I probably should have called the police, but nothing has happened since. And I don't want to stir up more trouble. Emma is 13 now, and Ryan has gone off to college. But I still can't shake the feeling that I let those boys get away with something they shouldn't have, and I regret not taking a stronger stand to protect my daughter. My family and I had just moved into a large new house in Mississauga, Ontario, in an area called Winston Churchill. It was Halloween night, and we were busy unpacking our things and settling into our new home. My parents, my 4 sisters, my brother, and I were all exhausted from the move, but we were also excited about starting this new chapter in our lives. It was getting late, around 11:30 p.m., well after the trick-or-treaters had gone home. My mom had just called us to do some chores, and even though we were all tired, we knew we had to get things done. I was finishing up in my room when I heard what sounded like footsteps in the hallway outside my door. At first, I thought it was one of my siblings, so I got up to tell them to stop bothering me. But when I opened the door, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, and the house was eerily quiet. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was just hearing things, and went back to my room. A few minutes later, I heard the footsteps again. This time, they were louder, more distinct, as if someone was walking right outside my door. I jumped out of bed and rushed downstairs, where my parents and siblings were still working. "Did any of you just go upstairs?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. They all looked at me, confused, and shook their heads. No one had been upstairs, and now I was starting to feel a little freaked out. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that I was tired and hearing things that weren't there. But when I went back to my room, the temperature had dropped significantly. It was freezing, and I had to put on a sweater just to stay warm. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. But then, just as I was starting to drift off to sleep, I heard it again, a loud banging sound coming from my parents' bedroom down the hall. I sat up, my heart pounding. The sound was rhythmic, almost like someone was pounding on the wall. At first, I thought it might be one of my siblings, maybe too scared to go to the bathroom alone. But as the banging grew louder, I realized that wasn't the case. I got out of bed, hesitating for a moment before deciding to check it out. I slowly made my way down the dark hallway, my footsteps barely making a sound on the carpet. When I reached my parents' bedroom door, the banging suddenly stopped. I stood there, staring at the door, too scared to open it. I was about to turn back when the door to my own bedroom creaked open behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. "Who's there?" I whispered, but there was no answer. The door creaked again, and I saw it, just a shadow at first, but then it moved, slowly, as if it were coming closer. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the figure take shape. It was tall, impossibly tall, and as it drew closer, I realized with a jolt of terror that it was standing right next to my bed. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure loomed over me, its presence filling the room with a cold, suffocating darkness. And then, in a voice that was low and menacing, it whispered, "Woo." That was all it took. I let out a blood-curdling scream and bolted down the hallway, not stopping until I reached my parents' room. I threw the door open and flicked on the light, my heart racing as I looked around. But there was nothing there. No figure, no shadow, nothing. My parents rushed to my side, asking what was wrong. I told them everything: the footsteps, the banging, the figure standing by my bed. But they just looked at me, confused and concerned. They hadn't heard anything, and neither had my siblings. They tried to reassure me, saying it was probably just my imagination, that I was tired from the move and my mind was playing tricks on me. But I knew what I saw. I knew it was real. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. My family eventually stopped talking about it, brushing it off as a weird coincidence or a case of an overactive imagination. But I know the truth. I know that something was in that house with us that night, something that I'll never forget. It was a few years ago on Halloween night. My friends and I were all 20 years old. Right at that age where going to haunted house attractions was one of the best things to do on Halloween. We had heard about a place called Terror Manor, a haunted house attraction that had gained a reputation for being one of the scariest in the area. It was only open for 4 years, and this was its final year of operation. The attraction was unique. It wasn't your typical guided tour. Instead, it was a group exploration through a maze where the only way out was to find a key hidden somewhere in the basement. Once you found the key, you had to use it to unlock the exit door. It sounded like a blast, so we decided to give it a try. The first room we entered was a living room, complete with a giant open coffin in the center and convincing spider webs covering every corner. The furniture looked antique and dusty, and the floorboards creaked with every step. Bloodstains were splattered across the floor, adding to the eerie atmosphere. We could tell right away that this haunted house was going to be intense. As we moved to the next room, the dining room, things got even creepier. The rooms that followed were dimly lit by lanterns mounted on the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to move with us. Actors in horrifyingly realistic costumes jumped out at us from behind corners and doors, and even though we knew they were coming, they still managed to scare us every time. The maze was designed to be confusing, with fake doors and dead ends that made it difficult to find our way. We spent what felt like hours wandering through the house, trying to find the door that led to the basement. When we finally did, I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. The basement was pitch black, and the idea of going down there was unnerving, but we had no choice. We descended the creaky wooden stairs, each step echoing loudly in the silence. The darkness was so thick that it felt like it was closing in on us, and we had to feel our way along the walls to avoid bumping into each other. Suddenly, I bumped into someone, and I immediately apologized, thinking it was one of my friends. But when I asked who it was, no one answered. Instead, a hand reached out and placed itself on my shoulder. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I took off running, screaming and laughing at the same time. There was something about the darkness, the unknown, that made the situation both terrifying and exhilarating. We stumbled around in the pitch black, trying to find the key that would lead us out. Eventually, one of my friends found it on a desk in the corner of the room, and we all bolted back upstairs, eager to escape the suffocating darkness. When we reached the exit door, we dropped the key into a small bin, just as instructed. There was a sign that read, "Drop keys here, please." We laughed, relieved to be back in the light, and started walking away from the attraction, joking about how scared we had been. But as we walked further away, we noticed something strange. A figure dressed in a black robe and a bloody pig mask had stepped out of the exit door and was following us. At first, we thought it was just part of the act, maybe an employee trying to give us one last scare. But as we continued walking, the figure kept pace with us, always staying just a few steps behind. We started to get uneasy, wondering if this was really part of the attraction or if something more sinister was going on. We decided to test it. As a joke, we started running, and to our surprise, the figure ran too. We stopped, and so did he. We stood still, and he mirrored our movements. What started as a funny game quickly turned into something much more unsettling. As we got closer to my friend Ethan's house, we began to discuss whether we should leave the figure there. We didn't want to give away where Ethan lived, but the figure had been following us for 5 blocks now, and we were starting to get seriously worried. When we reached Ethan's house, he told us that the front door was broken, so we had to go around to the back. We waved at the figure, trying to play it cool, and made our way to the backyard, shutting the gate behind us, but the figure didn't stop. He opened the gate and started walking toward us, this time much faster. Ethan yelled for his dad, telling him to get his gun. That seemed to get the figure's attention. He slowed down, turning his head to face Ethan. Just then, Ethan's dad burst out of the back door, a pistol in hand, and aimed it at the figure. "Get out of here, or I'll shoot," Ethan's dad shouted, his voice filled with anger. The figure raised his hands and backed away, his voice trembling as he pleaded, "Don't shoot. I'm only 27. Ethan's dad kept the gun trained on him until he was out of sight. We were all shaken, but relieved that the situation had ended without anyone getting hurt. But as we sat down to catch our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We contacted the haunted house attraction the next day to report what had happened, but when we described the figure in the pig mask, they informed us that they had no employee dressed like that. Whoever that person was, they weren't part of the attraction. We'll never know who was behind that mask or what their intentions were, but the experience left us all deeply unsettled. It was a Halloween night that none of us will ever forget. Love creepy stories? Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one. Our email is in the description. Please send in your horror stories.